Ag bogar rai an chéad ceistela I heachta Bríd Smith.
Margaret, Minister, I'd like to ask you about, and we've had a lot of discussion about rural Ireland today, but about services in rural Ireland that are bus services that are run by private operators and how accessible they are to the use of the free public transport scheme. It was about 5 years ago when the National Rail and Bus Workers Union warned that the massive cuts to services that were taking place would lead to lots of areas being neglected, and there are many areas where the private operators do not accept the free travel.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy. The Free Travel Scheme is a non-statutory scheme administered by the Department of Social Protection, which is available to people over 66 years of age or who are permanently resident in the state, and to all who are permanent resident in the state, and to all carriers in receipt of a carer's allowance. The scheme is also available to certain people with disabilities and people who are in receipt of certain welfare-type payments. The fundamental principle of the scheme, as originally envisaged, is to utilise spare capacity in public transport services which operate in any case with or without eligible persons. But there are also really strong social and benefits to our people in providing this service. As Minister for Transport, I am responsible for policy and overall funding in relation to public transport. However, I am not involved in day-to-day operational matters, including those related to the operation of commercial bus services, their fare structures or the acceptance of free travel passes. The NTA has no direct involvement with the free travel scheme or commercial services either. While all public service obligation transport services, including rural local link services, do provide free travel to eligible pass holders, my understanding is that only some commercial operators provide the service. Those private bus companies that have chosen to opt into the free travel scheme are reimbursed for carrying non-fare paying passengers at a discount to reflect the fares foregone nature of the scheme. Any assessment in relation to new private operators seeking to enter the scheme or extending the scheme to all bus services licensed by the NTA would ultimately be a matter for the Department of Social Protection. Such determinations would need to be cognizant of likely cost implications. Since 2019, approximately 95 million in exchequer funding has been allocated per annum to operate the free travel scheme. Any decision to extend the free travel scheme to include more private operators, including those operating in rural areas, would require significant levels of further state funding, both to implement and to operate. That has to be a matter of discussion between the Department of Social Protection and the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform as well.
Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Minister, and that's exactly what my question asks you to do. Will you raise this with the Minister for Social Protection and the NTA, the National Transport Authority, because there are difficulties being faced by people in rural Ireland whose free travel passes are not operated by some of the private bus companies. And you know, I think, just to reiterate, I think this is a more disadvantaging of the people of rural Ireland. If you live in the cities, you're likely to be able to catch a Bus Éireann bus or a Dublin City bus or a Lewis or a Dart, and you're covered by the free pass in all of those circumstances. But there's chunks of rural Ireland where the services are not extended to cover the free pass. And I think the government themselves have said that there is a limited number of private operators who accept the pass. So again, some joined up thinking, and will you talk to the department, will you raise this with the Department of Social Protection and indeed with the National Transport Authority and try and resolve the difficulty?
Thank you.
I will, but it will be part of an integrated assessment of and modernisation, update, review of how we're providing school public transport, which needs to be reviewed and improved, how our own PSO system is working. A lot of the supports we had through the COVID period helped us get through. We're in very difficult times, but we need to do a complete review of our PSO, particularly because we're also introducing a lot of new bus services in the Connecting Ireland, particularly for rural Ireland, in the Connecting Ireland programme. And there, I think, it's the whole range of different funding requirements. Yes, to try and encourage as much commercial operators to be able to provide the concessionary travel for those who are eligible, but also to provide new services. And it's that getting it right, and also, I suppose, recognising that we've introduced fare reductions for those under 24, and this year for everyone. It's the best use of resources to maximise particularly rural public transport will be something I will talk with both ministers.
Deputy Smith.
Okay, well, I do think there's probably a degree of discrimination here, because there are parts of rural Ireland where you have no choice but to avail of privately run public transport that isn't supported by the PSO levy, and that many people find they cannot access what is a great scheme for people who are 66 and over, and others, as you outlined at the beginning, whether they're carers or people with disabilities, etc., but they can't access it. So surely that's a form of discrimination against them, and I'd ask you to attempt to close that loophole of discrimination by opening up discussions with the Department of Social Protection, with the National Transport Authorities, and honestly look at the difficulties that are faced by some people in areas of rural Ireland where they can't use their free travel on bus services. And regardless of whether they're availing of the PSO funding, they should be made to, or there should be some scheme brought in to cover the provision of free public transport for every citizen who's entitled to it.
Minister to conclude.
Yeah, I agree, and it does. But in any budget discussions with ultimately the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform are going to have to help cover the costs here. And as I said, in any government at any period in time, you have a myriad of different desire to pay for childcare, desire to improve our education, our health system, and so on, and also improve and increase the provisions for public transport, particularly those who are dependent on it, who don't have alternatives. So yes is the answer, but that has to be in the balance as well of also providing additional services, PSO services, and also providing fare reductions, some of the ones we mentioned earlier on. It's getting the balance right between those different mix of things is what we would seek to do.